Welcome to Tuesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live here on Giants.com as well as the mobile app. He's Paul Dottino. I'm Lance Medow with you for the next 60 minutes. It's presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Multiple ways. If you'd interact with us here on the program, you give us a ring, 201-939-4513. You could also hit us up on social media, hashtag Giants Chat. He's at Giants WFAN. I am at Lance Medow, one word, last name, Medow. And as a reminder, you can find the archive of this show and our entire podcast network on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at Giants.com/podcast. So a lot to cover on this program. We have the upcoming East-West Shrine game, which is coming up on Thursday, so we'll delve into some of the prospects. We also have the stage set for the Super Bowl, with conference championship games wrapping up, and the coaching carousel is somewhat slowing down. The New Orleans Saints is the only one, Paul, that we are waiting on. And as far as the Giants' impact, Dallas recently just announced that they're going to promote Brian Schottenheimer, their offensive coordinator, to the head man, longtime assistant. Outside of that, I mean, the Eagles and the Commanders had very good seasons, so there were no changes on that front. I guess the only thing pending is if maybe the Saints go after Cliff Kingsbury, that could perhaps change things for Washington. Outside of that, I don't really foresee anything major within the division tilting either way.
Well, there is one other item, and that is Mike Kafka had 2 interviews with the Saints.
Well, that's from the Giants' perspective.
As the head coach. So potentially, and I don't know if the Senior Bowl has any impact on what the Saints are doing, but Kafka is one of the 2 head coaches at the Senior Bowl. Practices are going on right now in Mobile, Alabama. If they are still interested in Kafka, I suspect, he's kind of busy the next few days.
Just a tad. Yeah.
He's got something going on. So if they're holding up, maybe that gives you an indication that he's still in the mix.
Well, or it could be they're waiting on coaches from the teams that are also still competing, something to that degree. Here's the beauty.
Absolutely.
Here's the beauty from the Saints' perspective. They have no competition. Everybody else that had a vacancy hired.
That's
they could
true.
wait. I mean, I know this is not going to happen. If they want to wait to hire a coach till April, they could do that if they wanted because they're not going to lose out on a candidate. I know, obviously, I'm being facetious from that standpoint, but that's the benefit of where the Saints are right now. If they want to wait, they don't have to necessarily feel as if there's overwhelming urgency to get something done tomorrow.
Did you see their list of candidates, and did anybody from that list accept a job elsewhere? Do you remember?
Well, the only one that pulled out that I can tell you is Joe Brady, the Bills' offensive coordinator.
He said he was going to stay.
Correct. He initially interviewed, and then he said, no, I'm going to stay with the Bills. And the reason why that's important to note is because Buffalo was just eliminated, so he would have been clear to have another round of interview if need be. That's the only individual that I think was notable where you were wondering, is he going to stay, is he going to go? Kafka, you just mentioned, he clearly is free to go. You have Mike McCarthy, who's a free agent head coach from that standpoint. And then if they're looking at any of the Chiefs and Eagles assistants and anybody on the Commanders now is free to interview since they were ousted as well. So nobody else on that list jumps out to me that would be taking themselves out of contention.
All right. I'm looking at NOLA.com, which is the paper down there that covers the Saints.
Sure.
And they're saying right now the finalists still are Mike McCarthy.
Yep.
You've already mentioned him. They are also saying Kellen Moore.
Okay, who's on the Eagles staff.
Eagles OC.
So they would have to wait for him now.
Cliff Kingsbury, you mentioned from the Commanders. They're OC also.
Yep.
Darren Rizzi, who was the interim coach, is still in the mix. Interesting. Local New Jersey guy, as a matter of fact.
Absolutely.
And then Anthony Weaver, the DC from the Dolphins, also apparently is a finalist. And then Mike Kafka, as we mentioned, the OC from the Giants. So those are the folks still alive.
Yeah, so they have a few that they could hire right now, and then there's others that they have to wait till the Super Bowl wraps up. So that's why I'm saying I wouldn't be surprised if...
If the Senior Bowl wraps up.
Correct, the Senior Bowl. But I would think, based on the fact that Kellen Moore is still in the mix, if they really like him, Kellen may have said to them, hey, if you guys are willing to wait, let me get through the Super Bowl, and then I'm more than happy to talk to you again. And once again, from New Orleans' perspective, unless they feel that they're going to be behind the 8 ball with the head coach hiring his staff, what's the harm in waiting? For example, if you remember 2 years ago, when the Cardinals hired the Eagles defensive coordinator, right? They waited till after the Super Bowl. Now, he was at a disadvantage, right? Because he still had to put his staff together.
Yes.
But there's been scenarios that have played out like that. That's why I'm not thinking that New Orleans is saying to themselves, hey, within the next 2 days, if we don't have a head coach in place, it's going to be problematic.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in addition to that, of course, there is the East-West Shrine game that I mentioned is coming up on Thursday. So practices are going on. They've been going on the last few days, very similar to the Senior Bowl. And this is a game which to me is twofold. Number one, it gives you an opportunity to see some players at the lower levels. There's some D2, D3 guys that are going to be in this game. And we've seen some of those players all of a sudden creep up in the draft in previous years. So that's number one. Number two, it's appealing because you're going to get to see some quarterbacks that are not necessarily part of the hype machine right now.
Yeah.
Right? Who are Sanders or Ward. Case in point, Kyle McCord, to me, is, I think, the most notable quarterback that
from
is taking part, who was previously at Ohio State. And he had a really impressive season with the Orange this past year. So the environment, once again, even shapes the QB on the collegiate level. But I think it's nice to get exposed to quarterbacks who may not go in the top 10 picks of the NFL draft, but could end up in a place where maybe they could compete and very well could thrive.
McCord had the best practices this week of the Shrine Bowl participants. I got to watch them online during the course of the week, and I won't say he was eye-opening.
You have a special stream, by the way, that comes to you,
No,
right?
actually, Sean Merriman, the former Chargers and Bills linebacker, has a production company called Lights Out Sports TV. And they signed up with the Shrine Bowl, and for the first ever time in Shrine Bowl history, it's the 100th anniversary of the game, their practices were available free online as if you were watching them on television. So I spent 2.5 hours each of the last 4 days.
I'm not surprised.
Each day watching the Shrine Bowl practices. And I will tell you, I was glad to do it. I did see a number of guys, a good dozen guys that I'm really interested in, that I'm going to be targeting. If once we get our plans finalized for the Combine, if we get that squared away, I'm going to be very interested in finding out more about them. It was, to me, what the Shrine Bowl practices were, because we know the Senior Bowl guys, almost all of them get drafted. Last year, the Shrine Bowl had a record 57 players taken in the draft, and they had over 90 guys who were actually invited to the Combine. So the Shrine Bowl is becoming a much more important all-star game than what it used to be. But what I find from these practices is it allowed me not just to look at some of the second-day guys and maybe some of the fourth-round guys, but also it allowed me to focus in on names that I wasn't thinking about. Like, I'm already putting together a list of guys I want to research at the Combine, guys I want to talk to, guys I want to ask about. But now the Shrine's giving me an opportunity to go deeper and add to that list more guys for me to research and get cut-ups on. And so, I mean, I can honestly tell you when I went through it. I mean, here's a guy, right? Nick Nash, San Diego State, wide receiver, really showed out really nicely in the practices. I had no idea who Nick Nash was until this week.
Well, because some of these guys are not from big-time programs.
San Diego State.
That you're watching
right?
on a weekly basis. Yeah.
So there's a great example. How about this guy? Thomas Perry from Middlebury.
Well, that's one of the lower division players that I was referencing.
Comes out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
He's a guard and a center. Yesterday against Nazir Stackhouse from Georgia, who is a really strong, big ox of a man, defensive tackle. And I like Stackhouse. He stoned him on 2 one-on-one bull rushes. Just stoned him. Stood him right up and stoned him. I mean, honestly, guy from Middlebury? That's, all of a sudden, now people are going to do a double take and say, well, remember Ali Marpet?
Tampa Bay Bucks. Yeah.
Came from Division III.
Yep.
And had, 4 or 5 year career?
Before he retired, yeah.
With the Bucks. If you can find one of those guys, do it.
Well, and it's also good because they have an opportunity to go up against some powerhouse pass rushers. For example, like Elijah Roberts, okay, from SMU.
Yes.
So if you put Perry against him, you could see, okay, well, wait a minute. Just because Middlebury wasn't tested during the course of the regular season doesn't mean that he can't handle a level up or two.
Sure.
That's why these practices are key throughout the week. Not so much the game itself. I mean, it's the same thing with the Senior Bowl, but it's about the reps and what they show, competitive fire, how fast they adapt to the new schemes that are being implemented. There's so much that you can read into. Actually, on a related note, our very own John Schmeelk, he had an opportunity to talk with Shane Bowen and John Egarugu, who is the defensive coordinator for the West team. Bowen, of course, is the head coach. And, one of the things that came up in the conversation is, what are you learning about these guys that you wouldn't normally learn if you were just out scouting or having a conversation? And you're seeing how quickly they pick up the language of the schematics of what they want to implement. And also, even how they go about their daily routine. How early are they up? What are they looking to do before breakfast, after breakfast? I know some of these details seem like minutia at the end of the day, right? But these little things do add up.
I'll give you a simple...
in terms of whether or not you want to bring them into your organization.
Simple phrase, work habits.
Yeah.
You get to see these guys' work habits, which you're not going to get by going to their college practices, because now you're around them for 4 straight days. And you get to see everything about their routine, and also how do they interact with teammates? How do they interact and respect their coaches? How do they follow instructions? These are all extra bonus intangibles that you pick up. The Giants having 7 total coaches in these 2 college all-star games is a big deal.
Because you're now being exposed to, once again, their daily habits that you normally wouldn't have the ability to take in, because other coaches, they'll get the one-on-one meetings, but they're not necessarily getting the every single second of the day routine that they're putting under the microscope. So it's a nice additional bit of information that they can then bring back to the front office and Brian Dable and Joe Shane and so forth. But, the other side of things is Shane Bowen also gets a taste of what it's like being a head coach, which is good for him.
Oh, sure.
Because I'm sure he has aspirations down the road. One of the things he also brought up was he's been sitting more in the offensive meetings,
yes,
right, than the defensive meetings. Because just out of interest, seeing what they talk about, what they're emphasizing, since he's seeing it through that narrow lens of being a defensive coordinator.
I think ultimately, when all of these coaches come back from these 2 all-star games, the Giants will obviously pick their brains, right? All of the personnel guys and the scouts will say, okay, this is what we have on player X, okay? Hey, Shane, you had him at your game. This is what I got. Blah, 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 X, Y, Z. You got anything to add? Good or bad? Fill us in.
Sure.
Give us some, like the butter on the English muffin, right? Fill in the little cracks. In this report.
Interesting analogy, yeah.
Well,
I didn't think you were going to go there, and I'm actually surprised there wasn't an Italian food reference where you whip that one out. Butter and an English muffin? I didn't even know you eat English muffins.
I do.
This is a startling development.
But it works really well. Well, would you rather have butter on a baked potato and see how it melts through
That's
all
fine.
the
Sure.
cracks
Or
in
you
the
could have
baked
went
potato?
with a bagel, too. I think people
all right.
Buttered bagel.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
the English muffin has all those cracks and crevices, and the butter
sometimes
kind
the
of
bagel
goes
does
in there.
too.
Does it really? I don't know.
On the shape.
Anyway, the
crevices.
point being,
Yes.
though, you can fill out the player's personnel file with the coach's firsthand report that they're bringing back from these games.
And it may be a tiebreaker, actually.
It could
if you're
be
between
huge.
2 players.
Absolutely. What if the coach comes back? What if Shane Bowen comes back and says, hey, yeah, those 2 tight ends, I see what you're saying. But that one guy, we asked him to play specials in the All-Star game. Believe it or not, he gave me attitude. Really? Oh, okay. We'll mark that down.
Yeah. Well, or the simple fact that you were around one of them and you weren't around the other one.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the other thing that comes into play. Joe Shane has talked about this a lot. When a player comes up in free agency, they may go back to being exposed to that player right earlier in their career as they were entering the NFL.
No doubt.
One of the things that Shane emphasized is even when you're signing a guy in free agency, you'd rather bring in somebody, especially if it's a player that you're not re-signing, that you've had a little bit of taste of what they can do on and off the field as opposed to the land of the unknown. Now, you could talk to other coaches, you could talk to other front office members, but your own perspective could be a huge difference maker in terms of whether or not you want to invest X amount of dollars in a player or are willing to give him an additional year on the contract per se.
Well, the bottom line with all of this, and we said it on yesterday's program when Matt was on with me, and one of our callers even conversed about this very point. I tell people every year, don't get caught up in the first-round draft pick. I get it. That's the sexy one. That's the one that gets the headlines. That's the one that everybody wants to be an immediate smash, and they want that guy to go to the Pro Bowl. Okay, fine. I totally get that. I'm not saying to squelch the value of the first-round draft pick. But my God, your best teams, they hit on the second day and the third day. You need to get a handful of guys from your draft class. You can't just get one or two guys at the top. You need to get a handful like last year.
Yeah.
I mean, look at how many guys from last year's Giants draft, guys like Moisau, Tracy. These guys were deep. They were third-day picks. They gave the Giants value. I mean, how about Micah McFadden from a couple of years ago? Look at the value. The guy's a starter, held over 100 tackles. You got to pay attention to these guys. These are the players who are going to provide, the vegetables and the mashed potatoes to your plate.
Okay, I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not even going to ask any questions. You could have went with depth, complementary pieces, but, you got to go with those food analogies. So the assumption is the vegetables are the complementary pieces to the meal. Is that fair? I don't want your words to be misinterpreted by the audience.
Your first, second, and perhaps third-round picks, they can be part of the steak. But once you get beyond that, we're looking at the mashed potatoes, the vegetables, and perhaps the salad.
Sure. Okay, well, once again, complementary pieces. Or the build-up to the main meal and so forth. All right, let's open up the phone lines as we move forward here, and we'll also get a little bit later on back into the East-West Shrine game and some of the standout players. We check in with Scott in New Mexico here on BBKL. What's happening, Scott? What do you got for us?
Hi guys. Nice to see you again, Lance. I have a couple of questions. I'll try to make it brief. I've been listening for the last 3 or 4 weeks in the scenarios that have been presented about bridge quarterbacks and backups and whom we might take in the draft. And Paul, I think your idea of a bridge quarterback is good. I don't know necessarily if I would get Garoppolo because of his injury history, but I think he'd be acceptable. But I want to know why the Giants wouldn't make a more concerted effort to get Cam Ward. And I really don't understand it. The Giants, in totality, last year, I think had 30 touchdowns. And that's offense and defense. And that's horrific because I think only Chicago and there might be one other team that only had 30 touchdowns. And yet you have a quarterback who has about 158 touchdown passes in the 5 years he's played. And I don't understand why the Giants wouldn't do or wouldn't make an effort, even if it means giving up a draft choice next year and potentially a player to get a player like Cam Ward. I know John's on that bandwagon. And I just wanted to get an explanation from you two guys based on his criteria, in other words, his record, both at the University of Washington and at Miami, why we wouldn't be looking at him as the guy that might be a savior, not necessarily a Jaden Daniels, but somebody who we could build a whole program around. And I know Shedeur Sanders has been talked about, some others, Milroe. But when you look at the record, here's a guy who threw for over 4,000 yards twice in his college career. Very few have done that. I think he's the number one guy in college history who's been able to do that or has some of those records. So I want to get an explanation from either of you why we wouldn't be looking at him as the guy, not necessarily a savior, but the guy that we really can build a program around. I wanted to hear what you guys had to say about that.
I'll let you take this because I've already gone through this 100 times. But let me just correct you, Scott. John is not on board with moving up to get Cam Ward. What he is on board with is still taking a quarterback at 3, even after you sign a bridge. It sounds like your plan is do whatever you've got to do to get Ward, including moving up. John's not on board with that, and nor is anybody in this program.
That he wanted Cam Ward if he's available.
If Cam Ward is available at 3, he said he would take him.
Right.
You just said do what you've got to do to go up and even make a trade.
Yeah. And
nobody in their right mind is going to do that.
Well, and Scott, the other thing that you have to take into consideration is the two teams that are geared to select before the Giants.
Tennessee and
I mean, they need quarterbacks. right now. So even if you want to move up, who's to say you can do that, feasibly speaking?
I'm not saying you can. I'm just saying, is it worth the attempt to make? And that's basically what
Well, if you love a quarterback, my response would be it's always worth the attempt. If you love Sanders, if you love Ward, and you absolutely think that this is the guy, then it's absolutely worth picking up the phone and calling Tennessee and Cleveland. I don't think, though, either of those two teams is going to give up their spot because they also need quarterbacks. So if they know you want to move up to grab a quarterback and they're just as high on any of those two guys, why would they give up that asset to help another team's cause? It wouldn't make any sense. So that's why my response to you is it's not so much asking why the Giants wouldn't do that. It's asking, does Tennessee and Cleveland realistically want to give up those spots? And my response would be, I don't see a realistic scenario or even a hypothetical scenario where they would want to part ways with either of their picks.
Okay. Well, one other thing, one question that I always have. Paul, I'm sure you remember an offensive lineman by the name of Eric Williams.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see anybody like that on our offensive line. Is there anyone coming out who has that kind of nasty that Eric Williams had in Dallas? Because when you watch him, he's the guy who's a focal point that you can really put your arms around and say, here's who I want to have on my offensive line. I don't see anyone like that. And I'm especially worried that Andrew Thomas, although being one of the best in the league, if not the best, is injured a great deal of the time. And so is there anyone you see in the draft that would mimic somebody like an Eric Williams that you're looking at as far as...
And we'll let you go, Scott, on that
available?
note. Appreciate the phone call.
I do know, as far as names are concerned, Kelvin Banks out of Texas and Will Campbell out of LSU are guys that I've heard a lot about who are going to be the top two tackles in the draft. Now, I have not watched tape on those guys yet. I'm just getting into the Senior Bowl now, which we're watching while we're doing this program. Shrine Bowl, I've been watching all week. This is where I really start to dig in. So, no, the answer is, Scott, I absolutely do not have enough of evidence to say that anybody fits that category. I will be starting to dig in. These kinds of questions, to be frank, are much better for me after the combine because it's just too early for me. I'm trying to play catch up with every draft guru who's been doing this for 12 months. It's just not possible. But Banks and Campbell are the two names that everybody seems to believe are the top two tackles in this draft.
I just want to add something about Cam Ward because the question was also to both of us, and I know you've responded previously.
I do like Ward over Sanders, just so you know.
Well, I'm glad you clarified.
He's got better
that,
traits.
We have not had a conversation on the airwaves here. What I like about Ward is, number one, I love the experience factor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Paul, that is synonymous with success in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he's a multi-year starter, so you have me there.
Yep.
Okay, this is not one guy that you experimented with for a season. Number two, he's been in a variety of systems and schemes, and he's handled them quite well, too. That's the second thing that's appealing.
Stronger arm.
The third thing, which is now in terms of the skill set, which I'm with you there. But the other thing that I think is important to bring up, Miami had an atrocious defense this past season. Now, I understand the dynamics change when you get to an NFL team. That's not the point. The point is, he was put in a position where he had to shoulder a lot of the load, game in and game out, this past season, where Miami had to play from behind, had to rally, or they had a lead, they gave it up. And the reason why I like him being exposed to that is you're not questioning, he was the type of guy they jumped out to a 3-touchdown lead and then he handed the ball off for the second half. No, he was very engaged in a lot of contests. I mean, Miami was disappointing, I would say, overall. I mean, the loss they had to Syracuse, to me, is inexplicable to this day, just to get into the nuts and bolts of some of their games. So that, to me, is something that I don't just gloss over. I like the fact that he didn't have the ideal balanced team and was thrown into the fire. There were adverse situations, and I'm not saying it always led to a win. That's irrelevant at the end of the day. It's just the fact that he was battle-tested in having his back against the wall or having to be in a shootout, because not everything, once again, Paul, is going to be smooth sailing once you get to the NFL. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's a lot of things that jump out to me that are attractive. So, to answer Scott's question, if the Giants are there at 3 and Cam Ward is still on the board, without hesitation, I would take Cam Ward. I'd have absolutely no problem. But what I don't think is, once again, something that realistically would happen, because I just don't see Tennessee and Cleveland wanting to give up their picks, is for the Giants to aggressively move up to get a guy like Cam Ward.
Mm-hmm. Are you still on board with the bridge, and that if you drafted Ward at 3, you'd sit him for a year?
I would bring in a bridge quarterback no matter who you take at 3, okay? Absolutely, there is a need and a necessity for a bridge quarterback because, A, free agency happens before the draft. You can't all of a sudden, Paul, be banking on, at 3, the quarterback we love is just going to fall to us. Or what happens if he's not there?
It's poison.
So you have to have the bridge quarterback. That goes without saying. But just because you have the bridge doesn't mean that you still all of a sudden can wait to find a guy when the clock is still ticking. I think you can accomplish both feats.
Pearson, was it Chris Trapasso from CBS who had Milroe going at 3?
I forget who it was, but yes.
In his latest mock draft?
Yeah.
The Alabama quarterback?
And there have been a lot of mocks where, like, Abdul Carter goes in 2 or Travis Hunter goes 2.
Yeah, but we had gone through a mock draft scenario yesterday. I was with Matt, and the first 2 quarterbacks went the first 2 picks, and I believe it was Trapasso said at pick 3, the Giants take Milroe. He actually had 1, 2, and 3 quarterbacks coming off the board with the first 3 picks. It's the first time I've seen anybody say that. That seems to be rather an outlier, as they say.
Well, there's going to be a quarterback that's going to rise up the charts, Paul, once we get through this season.
It wouldn't shock me if
that's going to happen.
If Milroe is a late first rounder. Somebody's going to trade back maybe into the end of the first round, or somebody down there just takes him. I think he will be the 3rd quarterback taken.
Yeah, but
and he probably will be a first rounder. But 1, 2, and 3? Wow, that was kind of surprising.
Remember, it always goes back to teams are always in need of quarterbacks.
Yeah,
and as a result, Paul, even though you think it may be a reach, it's not a reach to them if they believe in the signal caller and think he's going to be the guy.
You'll like this because you love my food analogies.
I have a third one today. Wow, this is a real treat.
I have said these quarterbacks rise like yeast in the oven.
Another
they just go right up. They just go right up the board.
Wow, I mean, I guess I could let that connect to pasta somewhat too with respect to yeast.
You can.
So, but I'm stunned and surprised.
But
that's
bread
a bigger development than Milroe going 3rd.
Bread is universal. Everybody eats bread.
No, they do, and that's part of the Italian cuisine.
There you go.
Yeah, maybe garlic bread specifically. Okay.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Bread is bread.
Just want to make sure that you approve. All right, let's move on throughout the conversation here. We check in. Let's go to Jerome in Charlotte here on BBKL. What's happening, Jerome?
Hey, guys. Love the show as always. Lance, happy to always hear you.
It's good to be back.
You. I took all my thunder about Ward. But I do think he's the best one over the class.
Don't worry, you only have like 3 more months to get in your thoughts on Cam Ward, Jerome. So don't feel as if there's much out of the tank at this point. Something tells me we're going to bring him up again and again over the course of the next few weeks.
Right, but my biggest thing is he's not available, and we really need to crack down on defense. Put somebody next to Dexter Lawrence, and whoever that guy is, let's go ahead and beef up the defensive line, and then second round, or move back up in the first, what you just said, and get that quarterback. That way we have, I would love to have him that 5-year option.
Well, Jerome, let me just say this, because you know how I feel about the trenches, right? You've listened to the program a lot. So I am always about the trenches. And Mason Graham out of Michigan, to me, is the best defensive tackle in this draft. I don't think it's even close. And I just love the guy. And I have said that I think he's one of the 4 best players in this draft. And so I would strongly consider him at 3. I'd probably still pick Travis Hunter over him, but I'd strongly consider Graham. Well, I have to tell you now, Jerome, and I mean this sincerely. I just got done watching the Shrine Bowl practices this week. And the conversation that John and I had last week as he was heading out to the All-Star games is that defensive tackle was probably going to be the deepest position in terms of numbers of quality players in this draft. You're going to be able to get them in the second and third round even. Guys who are going to make it grades, who are going to be really good. And it was like, all right, well, let's start getting a look at these guys. So I'm watching these practices, and it's funny. I want Lance to take a look at something here, because here's a note that I wrote, okay? I want you to read this note that I wrote to myself. And it sums up everything you need to know about one of these defensive tackles. And I had 4 guys who I loved. These 4 guys at the Shrine. What did I write about J.J. Pegues from Ole Miss?
Bull in China shop.
That's exactly what he is. He is an absolute monster. The dude has power off the charts. He is stocky. He is thick. And he's got a motor that just won't quit. My goodness. I cannot even imagine there's an NFL defensive line coach who would not love to have J.J. Pegues on his team. And you know what? He's not going to be a first rounder.
No, you get him later on in the draft.
You're going to get him later on. Same thing with Jordan Phillips of Maryland.
Who's looked good at the East-West Shrine game.
And can play a number of positions on the defensive line. He's got versatility.
Yep.
The traits I wrote on him: explosive, power, anchor, beats double teams, and gets a push. How do you not love this guy? Now, he's probably going to be in the first round. I think he gets taken in the first round. But my point is, I said to John, this is the Shrine. This is supposed to be the second group of prospects. The Senior Bowl is supposed to have the better ones. Well, if this was the so-called scraps of the defensive tackles, imagine the guys that they're going to have at the Senior Bowl, which basically means what I'm trying to tell you is that I'm thinking I could probably have a much easier time passing on Graham the more and more I think about it, despite the fact that I love him, absolutely love him next to Dexter Lawrence. I can't imagine a better scenario. But there really are going to be so many defensive tackles that, you know what? You're not going to find a corner the caliber of a Travis Hunter once you start moving down into the second and third rounds. The drop-off in the corners is going to be big. So if you could take a Travis Hunter at 3, you take him. You worry about taking the defensive tackle later.
Well, here's the other thing related to your point, and it goes back to the question that Jerome posed. I would find it very hard to pass up on Travis Hunter if he's still available at 3 and the Giants choose not to go for a quarterback. Okay, so let's go down this hypothetical road, because here's the other thing about Hunter. He plays 2 positions. It's very rare that you get a player that can excel at 2 positions. God forbid you plan to put him at corner and it doesn't work out. Mm-hmm. Well, you could always salvage him and have him be a wide receiver. Later on in his career. Mm-hmm. How many guys, Paul, can you say you can do that? Or you start him out at wide receiver and then you flip the script to corner. So you feel as if, okay, there's a way to maximize his value for where we took him. You're going to pass up on that luxury to grab a defensive lineman to put next to Dexter Lawrence, who may or may not have the level of impact. I'm not willing to roll that dice.
And that's why I'm more and more thinking, as I see some of these depth defensive tackles that will be available, I got to think, I'm sorry to Mason Graham. I'm sorry, but I just don't think.
Well, he and his family are all worked up right now.
I just don't think I can pick you at 3. It's I've been leaning toward Hunter anyway. If people who've been watching the show know that. But I got to do it. I got to go Travis Hunter. I just have to. And again, corner is a premium position too. Let's not kid ourselves.
And it's even more premium when you take into consideration he can play the offensive side of the ball as well. And Jerome, appreciate the phone call. Thanks for giving us a ring. Let's check in on Wilson in Roxbury here on BBKL. What's happening, Wilson?
Laz, my buddy, man. As soon as I saw you on TV, I told Pierce that I got to call. And just.
How lucky I am, by the way. Yeah.
Hey, listen, Laz, man. All kidding aside, I hope you're doing good, man. Nice
I am.
You.
No, it's good to hear your voice, Wilson.
Let me rant for a couple of minutes, if you don't mind.
Well, we may not allow a couple of minutes, but we'll allow you to maybe get a few things out. Yes.
Go ahead, Wilson.
Listen. If John Mara couldn't sleep before, he's going to have to be sedated now after last Sunday. But as much as I love him, and Paulie knows this, I know he has tried to fix his mess. he's been unlucky. But this time, when you choose to bring a coach that won 9 games in 2 years and a general manager that has destroyed this franchise, destroyed it, and everybody wants to give him a medal because he found a running back in the 4th round that everybody wants to put in the Hall of Fame, he has nobody to blame but himself. I mean, Giant fans like me, we have no other choice but to, this is the reality, and somehow find something to look forward to next year, to find excitement. It's going to be hard because I think it's going to be a dumpster fire, but it is what it is. But you know what I don't want to hear anymore, Lance, and I want to ask you this because I asked Paulie this. I don't want to hear any more excuses, man. I don't want to hear any more about their schedule. I don't want to hear that their record next year doesn't matter after, you won 3 games. And what I don't want to hear anymore, Lance, is this. If somehow John Mara lets this general manager draft a quarterback with a 3rd overall pick, I don't want to hear that he's got to sit for a year. Not after you won 3 games and you had the worst record in a 100-year history. Lance, tell me this. How can you tell Giants fans that you're going to draft a quarterback with a 3rd overall pick, and then, Paulie, I love you, but how are you going to tell Giants fans he's got to sit for a year, Paulie? How you tell Giants fans that, Paulie? And Paulie and Lance, and I know I don't have any time, but answer me that question, Lance, because I haven't spoken to you in a while.
All right, Wilson. No, I'm more than happy to answer the question and appreciate the phone call. I don't think it's terribly hard to explain that because I think, Wilson, what you're looking at is, and I get it, you're anxious, you want wins, you want things to turn around. I get that. I understand that perspective, but the team has to look at the bigger picture. They can't just look at things through the lens of 2025. If this quarterback is legit, if you do take a quarterback at 3, and clearly there's conviction in the room, Paul, they feel good about the guy. Now, the other side of the equation is you don't just all of a sudden throw him out to the wolves and screw him up both mentally and physically. Then you're kissing the pick goodbye. How many times have we seen teams do that? Once again, look at the Sam Darnolds of the world, the Zach Wilsons, and I'm not picking on the Jets. It's just those are 2 quarterbacks that were taken very high. Mm-hmm. The environment wasn't ideal, okay? They went out on the field relatively early in their careers, and there's a reason why neither of them are part of that organization anymore. So, yes, I don't think, to answer your question, it's difficult to explain that if you're saying, okay, we like the quarterback, but our house is not completely in order, okay? Meaning the toys are not all around the quarterback. The offensive line is still a work in progress. Why would you then want to throw the quarterback out there if you also could bring in a veteran who could buy you some time? Now, I'm not with Paul where I say the quarterback has to sit for the entire year, but I think there's value in if you have a veteran quarterback, start him at the beginning of the year, and then hey, by the 7th or 8th game, Paul, I'm not against, similar to what Tom Coughlin did with Eli Manning, mm-hmm. and you want to now all of a sudden give him some exposure. You look at what the Falcons did, turning to Michael Penix Jr. There's value in maybe getting him on the back end of the season. I don't think there's a rule of thumb he's got to sit like Patrick Mahomes, but absolutely not am I on board that just because you take him 3, he's got to be under center day 1. So I think you're looking at a very narrow lens as opposed to you want this quarterback. You just said another caller brought up the fact that they want to take a player because they want the 5th year on the contract. Well, you want the quarterback on the 5th year of the contract. You don't want to get 3 years in and say, yeah, we have no interest in picking up the 5th year option. And you'll do that if you don't handle year 1 accordingly.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think the other thing to keep in mind, and Wilson had it exactly backwards. He said, well, you don't care about how many wins. No, actually, you do care about how many wins. John Mara has said, and so has Shane, and so has Dable, that the results have not been good enough. And again, I refer you back to John Mara's quote. This time next year, he needs to feel better about the team. Well, it's hard to imagine if next January the Giants are 3-14. It's hard to imagine he's going to feel better about the team. That's a long shot, okay? That's a long shot. I would say the results will have to be better for him to feel better.
Or at least the manner of the competitiveness of the team. Once again, I'm not making excuses, but you could be 3-14 and lose 7 games by a field goal or something.
That is possible, but unlikely. Unlikely. For him to really feel better after another year, this team's going to have to, I would say, again, I don't want to put a number on it, but you got to win more games than 3. You can't win 3 games again. The odds of that being okay like you said, it's possible but unlikely. So if you're going to, in your own mind, if you're the head coach, and you say to yourself, okay, we've got to win at least a handful of games, whatever number that handful is, are you really better off throwing that third pick in as a rookie and telling him, hey, it's 20 feet of deep water, shove him in, enjoy? What's the chances that that's going to happen, that he's going to win enough of games to make this franchise feel good about it? The odds are very, very long. Not just long, but ultra long, which is why the bridge quarterback is so necessary, Wilson, because the bridge gives you the best chance to win enough games that in all likelihood will make you feel better about the direction of the franchise and the performance of the franchise. You need better results. The bridge can get you better results. At least that's what the odds say.
Yeah, depending on, of course, who they go out and sign in free agency or if they acquire somebody via trade.
Now,
because
don't get me wrong. If they were to get Trey Lance or Zach Wilson, then all bets are off. Because if that's your bridge, then you're probably no better off. You might as well throw the number 3 pick into the game.
Well, that's why I'm saying
that's just foolish.
The caliber of the quarterback is going to determine that. And also, if you did go the route of, let's say, Trey Lance or Zach Wilson, then I think the legitimacy of the rookie coming in and winning that competition is much higher. Yeah,
absolutely.
For example, and I'm just giving you a hypothetical. If you had Sam Darnold go up against the 3rd overall pick, I think Darnold's got a pretty good chance that he could hold off, the rookie.
He better.
You should, based on your experience
can't.
and the season you're coming off of. But if you were talking about a journeyman or a rookie quarterback that was drafted high, it didn't pan out, the environment shifted, then the rookie is going to probably have a legitimate shot to come in and then start from day one.
Lance,
Bo Nix is a good example of that.
Sure.
In Denver.
Sure. And this is why, and I almost want to ban every quarterback call now for the next 2 months. I really almost want to do that because the fact is, the bridge quarterback is going to give us a tremendous amount of hints or clues as to how they feel about the quarterbacks in the draft. The bridge is the most important quarterback decision they're going to make because it will set up what they need to do in the draft regarding the quarterback. Really, let's not kid ourselves. So, free agency starts, March 10th?
Yeah, in that ballpark,
okay?
I believe.
We shouldn't have any other quarterback calls until March 10th.
Yeah.
Well, I know.
Good luck
in that. Good luck in that. I know. But really, that's really what it comes down to, folks. Because once they sign the bridge, we'll now be able to chew on it and say, okay, this is kind of what they're thinking based on that contract and based on that guy's resume. Now we can start going forward and looking ahead to who they might draft at quarterback. But the bridge is step one.
Just to go back to last year, which relates to what you and I are talking about, and you go through, and there were a high volume of quarterbacks that were taken in the first round. Okay, Caleb Williams started from day one. Well, the Bears didn't have a veteran polished quarterback on the depth chart.
And
so
they
it's
paid
understandable.
for it.
Well, of course. And now, by the way, he's got to learn a new offense, and he's got a new head coach, and he's only been in the league for 2 years.
Horrible mistake by the Bears. I mean, I wasn't a Williams guy anyway, but not having a bridge was a terrible, terrible mistake.
Now, the Commanders had Marcus Mariota, but Mariota at this point in his career, I don't think you'd put him in the way of maybe leapfrogging to the rookie. So I could understand why Washington did what it did. Drake May and Jacoby Brissett. Brissett started. Now, Brissett got hurt. He was up and down.
Right.
But they were patient with Drake May. The unfortunate part is Drake May also is now going to have to learn a new offense and a new head coach. So he's in the same boat as Caleb Williams. And this is what we're talking about, why you don't just throw him to the deep end. You have to think things through because there's a variety of decisions that you can make that could come back to bite you.
He's facing an unnecessary hurdle because of the system change.
Absolutely. Michael Penix Jr. Okay, I like what the Falcons did. You know, they went out. They invested in Kirk Cousins, so you knew Kirk was going to be the guy.
Right.
I mean, barring an injury. And Kirk struggled, so they then turned to Michael Penix Jr. So he got some experience late. Now, next season, they can go in knowing, okay, Penix is the guy. J.J. McCarthy, unfortunately, got hurt. It would have been interesting if McCarthy did not get hurt, how things would have played out, because McCarthy was playing in the preseason and looked good. So that is a TBD, to be determined. We don't know, truthfully, what would have happened. And then Bo Nix, okay, well, the Broncos didn't have a legitimate guy, so it goes back to what we were talking about with Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels, why he would have been thrust into it. But once again, if the Giants go out and they get a Russell Wilson or a Sam Darnold or a Kirk Cousins, it's not crazy that veteran quarterback is going to probably get first dibs, and then you don't have the level of urgency to throw in the rookie. Very different than some of the circumstances we just talked about and dissected in terms of just last year's draft. I didn't even go deep into the archives. All I had to do was go a year back.
And the Broncos were fortunate, actually, that Nix did not get hurt. Jarrett Stidham was their number 2, who I happen to like. I thought he was a good sleeper pick out of Auburn originally when he came into the NFL, and he's really never gotten much of a chance. Had one short opportunity to start, but really has not gotten much of a chance. But they were banking on him against Nix, and obviously Sean Payton just loved Bo Nix from the second he got his hands on him, and he put him in there. But thank goodness for them that it worked out, because had it not, Stidham, while I always thought that he could have been a dark horse for somebody, he really did not have a proven resume. And Denver, I'll venture to say they wouldn't have made the playoffs if Stidham had to play more games.
Well, also it helped that Nix was a multi-year starter. Specifically, we're talking about 5 years between two schools.
Well, it's one of the reasons I loved him so much coming out of the draft.
That's not on the resume. I don't know necessarily if this season goes according to plan for Sean Payton.
Nix was special.
Yes, it absolutely helped, and that's why you could see why Sean was attracted to him. All right, we're going to get to more phone calls as we move forward here, but speaking of the draft and speaking of the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Game and 75 other All-Star games known to man, we bring in our very own John Schmeelk, who is still continuing to map out every single pinpoint of the nation, it seems, in terms of monitoring these prospects. John, how we doing?
So I recognize Paul's voice. I don't know who the second person is.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. Well, mysterious individuals, when you leave town, all of a sudden take control of the microphone.
Who are you guys letting into the building down
It's amazing. I don't know how security allows these things.
You know what,
mishaps.
John? He squirmed under the doorstop. That's what I think happened.
Well, that's the benefit of being small, you see? Yeah. Have the
How you
leeway
doing, guys?
to maneuver.
Lance, good to talk to you. Buddy.
Absolutely. Same here.
John, we're watching the NFL Network right now, and I guess you're up in the press box, right?
I am across the field on the concourse.
Okay, so this is a very impressive practice for the first one for the Senior Bowl folks, because as we saw at the Shrine, they did not run these kinds of practices right out of the box. The Senior Bowl seems to be much more aggressive in their approach.
I would say a little bit, yeah. I mean, you had one-on-ones at Shrine as well. I think that, remember, this is NFL Network production compared to what the type of production you had at Shrine, which is more of a streaming production, I guess I'll put it.
Yes.
So, I mean, we've had one-on-ones. The first practice, I really focused on the offensive and defensive lines. I didn't watch much of the quarterbacks and such. I'll warn you guys ahead of time on that. And now I'm going to focus the other way. So the second practice, I'm going to watch the quarterbacks and the receivers, and we'll see where we're at. And by the way, we also by the way, just talked to Joe Shane on the record, too, which is why I was so late dialing in.
So let's not bury the lead. Go, John. Yes. What did he say?
So he told me exactly who he was going to
draft. I'm sure he did.
No, look, it was the type of answers you would expect. There was nothing groundbreaking there, obviously. He talked about how they're very open to all avenues at number 3. It could be a quarterback. He feels good about getting a good player in that spot. He thinks they're in a good position. He likes the spot that they're drafting, given what the class looks like. And he would not give any inkling as to leaning as the quarterback, non-quarterback, and I imagine those are the exact answers we're going to be getting from him up until when he talks at the NFL Combine.
On a related note, though, in terms of them being open and exposure, John, I was referencing the interviews that you did with the members of the Giants coaching staff that clearly are part of the Shrine Game coaching staff.
Yes.
How much did you get in, just out of curiosity, with Joe Shane about the benefit of what Shane Bowen and Eggs are doing and just the additional voices and perspectives that they may have in the draft room to break a tie or something to that degree when it comes to personnel?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And Joe was actually on the committee to help select the coaches this year to the 2 games. So it was fortunate that, given where the Giants are drafting, that he had a hand in that. And, yeah, he talked about how you really he called it a competitive advantage, where you have these coaches in meetings with these players, and they are seeing how they learn, seeing how they react, how they interact with their teammates. And they have information that a lot of these other people are not going to have moving forward here. So he really does consider it a competitive advantage. He's excited to get the input of not just the head coaches, but the assistant coaches that are here too, that are coaching in these games. So very excited to get on the field and talk to these guys once they get back during the draft process, because you really can learn things. And I talked to Mike Kafka today about that too. That interview's not up yet. You can find all these coach interviews, by the way, on the Giants YouTube channel. You guys should go check them out. I'm not sure they're going to show up on a huddle because I recorded, much to Pearson's chagrin, about 30 player interviews.
And I want you to know he was complaining religiously before the show.
Sure,
so thank you.
Sure
we got an earful.
Not happy about it.
Yeah.
Now it was just audio, which makes it a little bit easier on him.
Yes, it does.
And I did about 6 or 7 player interviews this morning already from Senior Bowl, and I'll probably get another 20 or so over the course of the time here. So those coach interviews might wind up in the podcast. So go check it on the Giants YouTube channel. I imagine they're on Giants.com.
As Pearson bangs his head against the wall as you break down that in and out.
John, this is
that means. Do you know what that means? That means I'm doing a good job. If Pearson's annoyed because I'm giving him so much good content at it, that means I'm doing my job down
The
here.
more work you do, the more work I do.
I told the
That is
people
correct.
John has to be an octopus with 8 arms to do all the stuff that he's got to do as a solo.
And again, this isn't me complaining. I'm just telling you how it works down here.
Oh,
so,
I got you,
tomorrow,
man, for
sure. Radio Row is from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. So I had my alarm set for 5 a.m. this morning. I was in a ride share. I won't give a sponsor name. At around 5:30, go right from there to practice, and then practice to media day, and then by around 5:30 or so, we'll be done. So that's like 12 hours, and then I still have to go back to the hotel room and write the practice report. So there are long days down here, but it's fun. I love coming down here. It's one of my favorite weeks of the year.
This is the first day for the Senior Bowl, John. Are there any additions, subtractions, status reports of guys who will practice, will not do the game, are hurt? Is there anything that you were able to glean from this morning that we should know about name-wise?
Good question. I have not looked at, like Dan Brugler's Twitter account. Usually he's really good about that sort of stuff. Khalil Mullings, I know, the running back from Michigan. I do not believe he's going to work. I believe I heard the second hand, so you guys, Lance, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on this one, because I'm going off what somebody told me, which I hate to do. I did not confirm it myself, that Shamar Turner, the defensive lineman, is not going to participate. They found some kind of injury, so he's not going to be able to go. Shamar Stewart, the other Shamar, also from the same school, Texas A&M, he is going to participate. So those are 2 guys I heard that are not going to go, that heading into this week we thought were.
Did the National ever get that 4th quarterback added to the roster?
No, they did not. As far as I can see, and watching the first practice, there were just 3 of them. Tyler Show from Louisville, who's an interesting player. He's actually, I think he's 6-year college career, 3 different programs, real toolsy, big. Dylan Gabriel, who only checked in at 5'10 and a half.
Yeah, not good.
Which is really small, and he looks every bit of 5'10 and a half on the field. And then the Canadian kid, Taylor Elgurzma, Lance, I know you've watched a ton of film on him.
Absolutely.
From Laurier College up in Canada. Big kid, actually has a nice little arm. I did not watch the quarterbacks a ton in that first practice, but those are the 3 for the national team.
Well, you rolled the dice, John, and it paid off because Shamar Turner, according to Ian Rappaport, is exactly what you laid out. Stress fracture from camp, needed a rod inserted into it, never fully healed, according to a source telling NFL Network's Ian Rappaport. So that's why he had to pull out of the Senior Bowl, to your point. Since you did focus on the trenches, I guess, I know it's early, anyone in particular at least catch your eye from what you observed today?
On both sides of the ball, too. I thought we had some guys that did really well. Someone that I'm kind of starting to highlight and circle as a day 2 player I would love for the Giants to go after is Gray Zabel from North Dakota State. He took reps at left guard. He took reps at center. He took reps at right guard. He was a starting left tackle for North Dakota State. He did not do tackle reps here, but I don't think he lost a rep in one-on-ones. He wasn't dominant, but he was going against some pretty good players, and he held his own as much as anyone did on an offensive line. So I think Gray Zabel, as a versatile piece on day 2 that can move all along the line, was someone that I thought did really good. Ariante Ursary from Minnesota. He was at left tackle for most of these drills. He was dominant. He was throwing guys around, very strong player. Josh Connerly out of Oregon, who came in with 34-inch arms. That was a big measurement for him. I thought he did a really good job on the offensive line. Then Marcus Bowe from Purdue. He was at right tackle for most of the reps during one-on-ones. Really good athlete. Probably needs to get a little bit stronger. Got the football a little bit later, so still a little work to do in terms of the fundamentals and stuff like that. But I thought those are the offensive linemen that stood out. In terms of the pass rushers, Oluwafemi Oladejo out of UCLA, I think that got that right. He was pretty good off the edge. Donovan Ezeraku out of Boston College. I really wish we had Jeff Fiegels this year. There are a lot of names in this draft that he would just absolutely butcher, and I wish he was with us. Josiah Stewart from Michigan on the edge. I thought he did a nice job. Smaller guy, but he plays strong. But I think the best pass rusher off the edge today had to be Mike Green out of Marshall. He's got juice. He's got speed. He's got bend. He had 17 sacks from Marshall last year, and you could see that on the field up close. He had a lot of juice coming out of his stance. Off the edge. Defensive tackles, I thought I'd see more out of Ty Robinson. He was one of the guys I talked to this morning. He was quiet in one-on-ones. I still love his tape out of Nebraska, good player. And then Aeneas Peebles out of Virginia Tech had a couple moments, and so did Yaya Black out of Iowa. But I thought overall just a really good group, strong, powerful. I think that's going to be a theme of this draft class, guys. The defensive front, the defensive line, and the edge, I think, did a really, really nice job out there today.
John, when will you get an opportunity to do interviews with the quarterbacks, if at all?
Well, I requested them all 3 days.
Okay.
So I put in for a request for them for today, tomorrow, and Thursday in that early morning interview window. So I'm able to get those guys at that point. Otherwise, I'll try to grab them on Wednesday afternoon. When they have the media day, but my guess is that those guys are going to be at the podium, so I might not be able to grab them one-on-one, but I will certainly effort it and make the attempt.
Yeah, just so people know, that would be Dart and Milroe, and I'm supposing Leonard, right?
Yeah, all three of those guys. And just FYI, Milroe measured in, and we talked about this, Paul, I think, off the air.
We did.
Measured in just under 6'2", so the height, not the best, and his hand size. I don't have it in front of me, but if you look that up, Senior Bowl posted all the measurements.
They did.
His hand size, and you can look that up and get the exact number. I don't have it in front of me.
I will definitely look it up.
It came in pretty low. I'm trying to remember what was Kenny Pickett that we had to talk about his hand size for about 4 months heading into the draft. I think it was probably in that range.
Yeah, those are two things that may make some scouts squint just a little bit.
I think Joe Burrow would like a word on that. So, they also question his hands.
It's not an automatic DQ, but it's something that causes a yellow flag.
Yep.
But, of course, if he goes out and throws the ball really well today.
Exactly. Then they'll love it. Hey, I can see it's sunny and clear there, John. It looks great on TV.
Yeah, it is lovely. I'd actually take my jacket off. It is in the low 60s. It is very nice. After rainy and dreary in Dallas, this is great. Unfortunately for me, the bag with all my clothes is still sitting in an airport in Houston.
What?
So, I got in at like noon yesterday, and then they had a chance to an airline I will not name had a chance to get my clothes on 2 flights after that, and they managed to fail, blaming weather. I called them up, and they were not able to clarify how weather would impact whether or not a bag gets on a plane, but apparently it does. I'm not quite sure how that works, but apparently that's how it works. So I had to do a run to an unnamed department store last night, and I'm in all like generic clothes right now because all of my clothes are somewhere on a tarmac in Houston, Texas.
Wow.
Lovely. Will that make the practice report? We're looking forward to that breakdown.
Well,
it'll make the expense report. I'll tell you that.
Yes,
that's absolutely going to make the expense report. That's true. Unfortunately, they want the practice reports to only be 60 seconds. I can give you 60 seconds on my luggage. That's for sure.
100%. Yeah. It actually it may add a little bit more substance to the analysis in terms of the players and the breakdowns. Well, listen, you got a lot of baggage, both literally and figuratively speaking. So we'll let you go because we're up against the clock. There's a serious cutoff here with Pearson, so we don't want to make him further unhappy. Given the circumstances
Pearson needs
of
to
the
eat his
workload.
lunch. Pearson's got to eat his lunch. You know,
not
about lunch.
He needs nourishment. Listen, we need to make sure he's energized for another go-around on BBK.
Well, yes.
All right, enjoy the Senior Bowl. We'll speak mañana.
Talk to you tomorrow, John.
We'll talk to you tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Absolutely. All right, our very own John Schmeelk from the Senior Bowl with us here on BBKL, as that is going to do it for us. Apologies for some of the callers that we had to move over to the following days. We'll hopefully get you on upcoming episodes. But once again, a lot that we needed to jam into.
Coach Marvin
on
says
today's
hi,
program.
Lance.
Okay, well, I send my regards back to Coach Marvin. I'm sure we'll cross paths on some upcoming show. Hopefully, we will be able to get his analysis on a variety of items as well. Just a quick reminder in terms of the Giants Huddle podcast, you go and subscribe to the Giants Huddle podcast. It features long-form interviews with Giants players, coaches, and front office staff, past and present. Plus, you can hear from the best analysts covering Big Blue and the NFL. Search for Giants Huddle and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, or you go to giants.com/podcast. And don't forget, if you're on Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star positive review for all of our Giants podcasts. For Paul Dottino, I'm Lance Medow saying so long here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Today's episode, part of the Giants platforms everywhere and giants.com/podcasts. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and stay locked to giants.com for all the latest.